Hello and welcome back to the Impossible Entrepreneur podcast. I'm architect Anna and I'm an entrepreneur on a mission to do the impossible. And I guess we're going to be talking about one of those impossible things today. I'm going to give a lot of caveats because this is not something I'm starting with, but I think it's something that's going to be super cool and it's something I'm going to be building over the next few years. And that is a self-evolving AI organization. What does that mean? What am I doing? Where did this come from? What does this mean for the future of work? So the way that I look at AI in a lot of ways is for optimizing an individual, whether that's an individual within a business or an individual who is an entrepreneur trying to do some crazy stuff. If you're an entrepreneur trying to do some crazy things, you can do more than ever now. And what you will be able to potentially do with AI agents in the future is going to blow your mind. And that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about today, because there have always been limits to what one person could do on their own. You usually need teams of people, you need lots of funding and backing and all of that stuff. And the way that I've always approached business is from a bootstrapping mindset. How can I build this myself? How can I learn how to do this without asking others for money or trying to get funding? Because there can be a lot of downsides to that. And with everything going on with AI, I think if you can maintain control of your business and the work that you're doing, and also just creative control to be able to play around with things, then that is the way to go. Once you start to take the funding route, you can get locked into doing something that honestly you might figure out in a few months is not really the right thing because technology has already changed by then, but you're locked down. So anyways, with the bootstrapping mindset, this is one of the things that is going to be kind of crazy. So when we're talking about AI normally, we're not really talking about AI agents. In most cases, we're talking about some form of generative AI or an AI wrapper. So like an AI company that has built off of one of maybe the one main large language models that exist out there. And that's totally fine. There's hundreds of thousands of those tools, and they are built for very specific purposes. The normal large language models that you've probably heard of are like OpenAI's ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude. You might have heard of like DeepSeek from China. You might have heard of Grok. And then also, you probably have heard of Copilot, but it's not actually a large language model. It's using the GPT models from ChatGPT and actually also Anthropic now, which is pretty cool. So that's normally what we're talking about when we talk about AI. We're talking about generative AI. When you start to get into agents, their usefulness in business is very high, but the risks are also quite high, which means that for most businesses, they're not really implementing them yet. And until the security risks go down, I don't really see that being something that will happen that quickly. There's ways to reduce security problems. You can run things on a local server so you don't have it cloud-based. Like if you connected it to a cloud server or if you had like a virtual private server like a VPS. There's plenty of those out there, but the safer way is going to be locally, whether that's on your own small device or if you have some sort of like server farm, cool, then yes, that would be something that you would do. And I've already told this story, which is the AI agents plants story. But when I'm talking about a self-evolving AI organization, I think there's a couple key points in the plant story that will be useful when you think about an AI organization at scale. Because I think it's all super theoretical right now. And if I were to build it, it would also be pure theater. Like, I don't need this right now. What I'm planning on building would be something where there are mass systems and operations that need to be handled that couldn't possibly be done with one person. Right now, I don't need any of that. I can work with one agent. I don't need 50 or 100. It's not necessary. So, the plant story. When I was working at a hackathon months ago now, I was an AI mentor and AI coach, and there were lots of other amazing AI mentors and coaches there. And it was a cool opportunity for us to network and talk and discuss what we are working on and what we're testing. And at the time, I was really not into AI agents. They kind of freaked me out. And that's where you might be right now. And this story actually really, really helped me see the value in them in a non-scary way. And that was one of the AI coaches and mentors talking about how they actually built a bunch of AI agents to maintain their plants and keep them alive. And I was like, what do you mean? Tell me more. And he told me like the initial process of what he did and why, like setting up them with a lot of rules, and they had to get approval for every single action. He had them connected to his phone. So actually, when you have AI agents, you can connect them to like your Discord or Telegram or even your WhatsApp if you have a separate phone number. And so he would actually see the conversations between the AI agents, and he would have to constantly be giving approval. Yes, you can do this. No, you can't do that. All of that kind of stuff. And he was like, this is very time consuming. I want it to be more of a hands-off process. I want the agents to be able to maintain my plants without me constantly approving them for every little action. So instead of having them like strict rules, he gave them philosophies. So he had multiple agents with different philosophies. And the reason for this is instead of them having like these constant boundaries and guardrails, like you can't do this, you can't do this, it gives them more freedom. But with freedom, of course, comes risk. So you want to make sure you build in certain guardrails, like things that they should absolutely never do, so that they don't do them. If you're thinking about connecting an AI agent to your email, for example, that would be like never delete an email because it could accidentally like delete a bunch of emails. In the process of trying to do something good, it could do something bad. So you want to make sure you have a list of things that it should never do, like what are the actual safe guardrails. But rather than having it stick to rules, like you can only do this here and there, and then have them have philosophies. So initially, with the agents, he had them basically reviewing pictures of his living room. So he had one agent connected to a Raspberry Pi, not the food. It's something that you plug into your device if you want to have an agent run like locally off the cloud. So it's going to be more secure. The reason he had this was because it was connected to a camera capturing pictures of his living room, and he didn't want pictures of his living room in a cloud where it's less safe. So he had them connected to there. And then the other agents were able to look at the photos. So once they looked at the photos, they could determine whether any action needed to be taken. So if there was a plant that was like wilting, they could decide whether or not they needed to water the plants or leave them alone. And if you think about this from a business sense, okay, if you see something that's gone wrong, you would normally need a human to make like high-level decisions for something like that. But what if you have all these micro decisions happening all the time? How would one person possibly do that? Also, humans do get decision fatigue. So how do you make sure that agents are going to make decisions in a way that's going to be safe and effective? So he had multiple agents reviewing photos. The two agents that reviewed the photos had different philosophies, like I was talking about. So the way he explained it was, if you were to go to a garden center or you were going to talk to people who work in fields, like farmers, and you ask them, okay, here's my plant, this is what's wrong with it, what should I do? They probably have different responses, but backed by very good understanding and perspective, but just different. So that's what he did. So they had two completely different philosophies on plant maintenance and plant care, and they needed to back up whatever it was. So if one agent said, okay, what I need you to do is you're going to have to water that plant because it's wilting. Another agent might say, no, you need to leave it alone. It's wilting, but that's fine. It will perk up, right? And they probably have very good philosophies for that. So the agents would then go, if they didn't agree on the situation, and they would do research to back up their decision. They would back it up with a bunch of research. Then he had another third-party agent, and its only job was to review the research to make sure that it was accurate. Okay, so this is where the checks and balances come in, because AI agents, they are autonomous. They can take action on their own, and they can take multiple steps on their own, which again can be fantastic, but also risky. So you want to make sure you have checks and balances in there. If you think about it like a human employee, it would be someone who is in your team taking initiative, right? They're not just doing the task. They're like, oh, I wonder, like, here's the overall objective of this thing. What else could I do to make this better? So they might take further steps, which could be good, but it could be bad. So he had another agent that was simply reviewing the research of these two and determining that the research was accurate. Then he had an agent at the very top, and its job was to review the research and make a final decision. So that's the structure. There's 5 agents. 1, only job taking photos. 2, with background philosophies that need to do research to back it up. Another, just to check that things are accurate. And then 1 at the very top to review the results and make a final decision. This process he called a parliament when they disagreed and they needed to come up with a decision. And he said they ran them about twice a week, and it wasn't very expensive because of the way that he set it up. So with AI agents, assuming they are actually separate agents, you give them different knowledge. Like if you listen to the episode that I did on building your AI brain. It is information management. It's going to be the data. It's going to be the knowledge that you're giving to an AI for it to do well. That could be background information, but it could also be the skills that it possesses to do that job. So one of the skills might be that these ones have to research. So they need to know how to research well, where to get verified sources, all of that stuff. But they also have their background information and philosophy. They might not possess the full context of all of the plants when they were bought, the objective of the owner of the plants, all of those things. They might not have any of that context. That might only sit at the very top. So if you're building out your very first agent and you're building out your AI brain, that's still awesome. That might eventually be your CEO agent with all complete full context that then reviews the others. So also when you're separating out agents, and this comes up a lot in this area right now, which is sort of tokens and how much you're spending on credit towards these agents, you can set them at a certain level of intelligence for the AI model that they're connected to. So you have an AI agent, which there was OpenClaw, which was released earlier in 2026, and it's kind of been supplanted by an agent called Hermes, which is a self-evolving agent. And with Hermes, you still have to connect it to an AI model. So you might connect that to like Codex, for example. So that is going to be OpenAI's, or you could connect that to Grok, or you could connect that to DeepSeek, or whichever. So some have more limitations and some are going to be more expensive than others. Once you connect it to a model, then you can connect it to the level of intelligence of that model. So for example, in Claude, there's going to be like Opus, or like Fable, that'd be ridiculous, or like Sonnet. So Sonnet would be like a less intelligent model. So you just look at the level of intelligence and then you figure out the task for that particular agent and which one it needs. It's possible that it could switch between them, but ideally it'd be set up for just one so that it doesn't make mistakes and it doesn't eat credits unnecessarily. So doing research on its own does not need to be like the most intelligent model because there's not decision making there. There's not as much reasoning. Whereas the top agent that was reviewing the results of these two, that's been checked by this one, would then need to have the most intelligence because it would need to be reviewing results and make a final decision. So if you are setting up a self-evolving AI organization, you can think of it like this, but at scale and for every different department. So rather than just having like AI agents for plants, one taking pictures, two reviewing the results and trying to like decide what might happen next, doing research, one checking their results, and then one making the decision, you think about that like, okay, that's the marketing team, that's the finance team, that's the sales team. Okay, cool. So now you can start to see how this is something that could expand. Each of them have different assignments. They have different knowledge files. They're connected to different tools. They have different abilities, and the context might be more or less. So I basically was designing a self-evolving AI organization for what I'm currently doing, like what would be needed right now to do really well, and then what would be needed in the future if I were to scale to some sort of like ridiculous amount. And so I phased it out, and actually I worked with ChatGPT to just generate an image of it so you could see like the different phases that were color-coded for which agents were needed when, and then also the workflows between them. So who answers to who, what's the hierarchy, what's the checks and balances process, what are the external agents that are just like ruthless efficiency experts constantly checking like token usage, workflows, if anything needs to be cut. And one of the things that I really like to do in my executive leadership training is AI strategy. And one thing I do there is I run pre-mortems. So we'll take a campaign or an idea and we'll run a pre-mortem on it, which is basically like a post-mortem would be if a campaign in a business failed, you'd look at all the reasons it failed to prevent those failures again. A pre-mortem is looking at all the potential failures before the campaign ever starts to try to prevent them, which can be super helpful, but difficult if you don't have the mindset for it. I'd say if you're really good at contracts, or even if you're someone who is like very anxious, you might think of all the possible ways that things could go wrong to try to prevent them. You might naturally be good at pre-mortems, but otherwise an AI tool can absolutely help you with pre-mortems to be like a risk management specialist, observing from multiple different perspectives from like operations, finances, culture, all of these things. And then it will look at all the possible ways a strategy or plan could fail. So the way that I would create the self-evolving AI organization is, yes, it would be built with different departments, very simple hierarchies. The skills, knowledge, tools would be, designated appropriately for each member of each team. Yes. But then also, I would want to make sure that these things could be checked. If you look at it from the perspective of the plants, how can you actually scale this up? There's different ways to organize the pieces of information so that they perform well. But then also when you're thinking about a pre-mortem, like all of the things that could go wrong, if you have an agent that owns the pre-mortem for each department, constantly looking for the warning signs of things that could go wrong, if it sees a warning sign, it can then trigger action, right? Whatever that action might be. And if you think about a normal organization, first of all, they don't really have like a list of pre-mortems. If so, it's not something that's held in a place that's super visible for everyone. And even if someone owns it and they've done the process of building it, looking out for these warning signs is not necessarily going to be constantly on their radar. So it could be months before they realize there's a problem or things are starting to fail. And then it could be several more months before any action can be taken to stop the failure or change things. Whereas within an AI organization, what could happen is if they were fully aware of all of the pre-mortem risks, everything that could possibly go wrong and the warning signs, they can basically flag warning signs that are already happening, watch them very closely, and discuss action that might need to be taken if they go further in the wrong direction, and then immediately take action, whatever that might be, within like a 24-hour period. So instead of it taking months to make a decision or months to even see the problem, it could be seen right away. And the way that you would do this is you can have AI agents or even just like automation systems have something like a heartbeat, which is basically how often they check something. So I had an AI automation that would basically check for new leads every 30 minutes, but it was eating a lot of credits. So I actually changed it to every 60 minutes between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. because then it also has a couple other actions it needs to take. And I was like, yeah, that's actually fine. So it eats 70% less credits. But yes, you can have a heartbeat. So you could have basically a security agent just looking for security flaws, and you could have that every 30 minutes, for example, or like every 5 minutes if you wanted to. You would then just judge whether or not that was important or necessary. And yeah, I mean, imagine it from that scale. Like if you could actually have AI agents working together to rapidly solve problems. Of course, they would then come back to me if it was a serious thing. You would always want to make sure that you have a human in the loop. So there's going to be a couple areas where that's like super vitally important. Finance is definitely going to be one of them. So again, if I were to build this now, pure theater, but eventually this might be something that matters. So my AI evolving organization or whatever would probably have a C-suite. And a C-suite is basically the chiefs. So like a chief marketing officer, a chief financial officer, a chief operating officer, all of those things. And they would, control different departments. There would be managers of each different department to check the results of the different agentic team members, whatever it is that they were doing. From a marketing sense, it could be that one is reviewing content, editing content, scheduling content, whatever, using description writing skills to produce written forms of content, and then the manager could be checking their results. And then once a week, it could take all of the things that had been produced, as well as all of the analytics gathered from that week, and put them into a report and share them with the CMO, so the chief marketing officer. And then they could basically have a quick discussion to make sure everything's on track if there's any issues. And then the CMO would take that to the weekly C-suite meeting, which you could run if it's necessary. And then they could all present across the board all of these things with the CEO reviewing. The way that I would probably have it set up is there would be isolated context for each of these things. For example, an AI agent who is working like a very simple marketing task does not need to know that my long-term goals for the business in 30 years are XYZ. If anything, that would be distracting pieces of information. It doesn't need to know that. What is the information that it needs to know to do well? And then only that. So the CEO would know everything. I don't even know if I'd probably like separate the CEO from my like personal brain context or not, or leave it purely business at this point. I don't know. But if you think about it from like a pre-mortem perspective, yes, they could solve problems very, very quickly. Security risk could be potentially handled also very, very quickly. And again, if it's something that's high risk, you would always want a human in the loop. So I've said this before, but there are certain companies that are already using AI agents, but in a financial sense, they're only allowed to like approve refunds that are less than $50. Anything more than that still needs a human. So if it was something that was a transaction, like a large transaction, it would still need to get approval from the CFO and then me. And then I would have to decide at any point if I want any of the agents to ever be able to touch a bank account, which at the moment, no, but maybe eventually it might be a limited bank account, right? Like one that only they have access to, and it doesn't have that much in it. Like I put a certain amount in every week or every month. simply for operation purposes with tons and tons of guardrails. Right. But at the moment, I'm not planning on doing that. One of the other things that I see as being super valuable for this, and again, I'm not talking about this being something that replaces humans. I'm talking about the ability for a singular human to do more. So for solo entrepreneurs out there with big visions that like maybe never would have happened in the past, maybe in the future, this will be something that you could actually do. Those big dreamers out there. One of the first ones I'm actually building is a sales agent. So Anna AI, she'll be taking sales calls and she'll be training off of my transcripts from sales calls. And I need at least 20 or 30 of them. And then once I get those, I still probably have to run a bunch of simulated conversations with AI to just fill in the gaps. And then I'll create that in a text format first. So like a chat AI version. And then I will work towards voice and video. So that will be one of the first agents I'm working on because of the massive bottleneck that currently is in my business. Because I'm so busy doing strategy days and coaching and trainings and public speaking, it's hard for me to actually work into my calendar consistently to have a bunch of sales calls. So it would be great if there was an AI version of me to get that information. But when you think about it, from this perspective of this constant feedback loop, think about it from sales for a second. So imagine you're talking to an AI agent. You know it's an AI agent. It's been completely like transparent. There's no like hidden, oh, this is AI. It's obvious to you that you're talking to one, and you know that it's being used for training. So you've given your consent and all of that. And then what it does is it takes the information. If it finds something valuable, it feeds that back to other departments that might need to know that. So it might flag it to the manager of sales, who then might share it over to the manager of marketing, who then might feed it back to like some of the funnel copy or ad copy that needs to be changed. Or for the ads manager, it might need to see if there needs to be more A/B testing in certain area, if like the target market or the leads are coming out weird. So you have this constant feedback loop of information. Or it could be that like, oh, maybe the offer needs to be altered slightly, or we maybe need to add in a new feature with the stuff that I'm planning on like bootstrapping for my tech startup later. I'm working on it. There will be an entire product team. So there'll be a chief product officer and constantly developing. There'll be an agent that's purely just doing research on new innovations that are coming out and looking for opportunities, which will then be fed in. So we'll be listening, right? Seeing what's going on the internet, seeing what people are talking about, also listening to customer feedback, what's working, what's not working, and constantly be trying to improve in a way that would be more difficult with a large human organization, just because startups, they can pivot really quickly. They're like little boats, whereas large organizations are like giant ships and they're harder to turn quickly. They're harder to steer. Whereas I think even if you had a large AI organization, you could still pivot quite quickly once it went through all of the checks and balances, which in an AI sense could be pretty fast. So yeah, I mean, it's really exciting to think about, but of course right now it's all just theoretical. But yeah, I can imagine in, I don't know, a year, 2 years, me having a once a week session with the CEO who's got all this feedback and all of these reports from all of the other agents and departments, and then us discussing next steps and what to do. And in this diagram that I created of all of these AI agents and all of their workflows and processes and checks and balances, I do have like a tiny segment on where I fit. And that is just thinking about where do I provide the most value as myself and as a human. So I'm actually just going to read it because I've got it open. Let me scroll down. Yes, this is my role. Okay. Strategist, vision, relationships. That's a good one for a human. High value decisions, necessary. Creativity, speaking as in public speaking, coaching, and then review and approval. So that is where I sit. But yeah, the way that I look at it is this could absolutely take an individual's ability from like 7 figures up. And you would not need all of this at once. You would not need dozens of different agents. You could literally just use one agentic system. Like you could just be using Claude Cowork with a bunch of scheduled tasks, which is currently what I'm doing because I'm evaluating the credits of using an external agent and connecting it to another AI platform. Because some of the cheaper platforms to use are not necessarily the ones that I favor. Like it's going to be cheaper to use Grok and DeepSeek if you connect it to an AI agent. But I prefer Claude at the moment. But again, all of these things shift very quickly. And by the way, I still do a lot of work with ChatGPT, but usually it's handover work to Claude. Like I might do brainstorming, thinking, testing, strategy in ChatGPT, then hand over that report to Claude to actually take action. So the way that I've split up my AI usage between ChatGPT and Claude at the moment is like kind of bulk dump work happening in ChatGPT and then very specific like precision work happening with Claude just to maximize my credit usage there so that I can do a lot more interesting things. So that's a little bit of it. And if I mentioned one of your roles and you're like, whoa, this is terrible. This is going to be putting humans at risk. What am I supposed to do about it? Well, first of all, if you have the expertise within that role, build your own AI agent with your own expertise and then license it out because you're still going to be working within that role now. But if you can have another revenue stream for yourself, as long as it's not a conflict of interest for your current company that you're working for, cool. Build it out for yourself. And then if something does happen where employability goes down in the future, you also have this thing to rely on. Like you can look at your level of exposure for whatever your industry is, whatever your role is, and determine whether or not you currently have any risk there when it comes to your career or your future. This is something you can do now. Like these tools are not new. AI has been around since the 1950s, but also these tools like ChatGPT was released nearly 4 years ago. These things aren't new. If you feel any fear towards any of this stuff, think about what you can actually do about it. So for example, if you are like a fractional CFO or basically a chief financial officer who maybe works like one day here, one day here, one day here, great, you've already diversified your income, which is awesome. But if you're like, oh, well, now you could just build an AI agent as a CFO, where do I sit? Build the CFO agent yourself because you're the one with all the expertise. Anything that I could build, it's going to be somewhat flawed. Of course, I will hire in experts to make sure that the context makes sense and the checks and balances are there and there's no risk, but I'll be paying them like a fee to then be able to build something to use repeatedly where you already possess that knowledge and expertise. So build it yourself and start licensing it. So of course, someone could hire you as a fractional CFO for 1 day a week, and you could be charging this amount of money. But also you could say like for other companies that you think you might want to work with, you could then say, great, well, you could also get a fractional AI agent CFO for this amount of money. And then you just be like, these are the risks. These are like the checks and balances. These are the things that I would like still not connect it to a bank account, but it's been built correctly because it's been built by me. So then you do have to like own it. And then put whatever kind of disclaimers you want on it. But then you're going to be working with these systems. You're going to be learning, but also you have your own product and service now. And then you stand to be competitive in the future. Could be something that you scale, something that just like replaces you. So if you don't want to work 3 days a week with 3 different companies that then bleed into the other days of the week because it always does, part-time is never really part-time, then yeah, maybe you could lean on this in the future as being your sole form of income. At least you've made yourself this competitive advantage because the roles are still going to need to be there. The work is still going to need to be done. And if I were to hire any humans within this self-evolving AI organization, they would be purely humans who are systems thinkers that can think across all of these different departments and where they sit and understand what actions need to be taken, as well as the constant like feedback loop of information. So they would need to know how to prompt an AI to get good results, how to be able to review the work to make sure that it's going to be accurate and solid. And those would be the people that I would need to be able to trust to make sure that something like this was working. So yes, you could still scale like a business massively with less than 10 human employees, but those human employees would not be cogs in the wheel. They would not be task-based employees. They would be systems managers. So that is the way that I see it in this regard. So yeah, it's really interesting. And again, it's all pretty theoretical right now. There are some companies that are building things like this. There are some individuals who are building out multiple different AI agents to handle lots of different tasks. But for you as an individual, you might just start with a simple agentic system that you might already have access to and work with it to build things. See if you can build some scheduled tasks that are maybe slightly more advanced. And then just start to think, how could I potentially use all of this in the future? Because it could be pretty exciting. So that is it for today. And in the next episode, we're going to be talking about time debt. What is that? So yeah, I will see you in the next episode, and I hope you have a good day and lots of food for thought. Okay, bye.